What's the one thing almost every organization neglects to invest in? It's not another CRM. It's not your next strategic plan. It's not another round of training for individual managers. It's the effectiveness of the executive team itself, the single biggest lever for organizational performance. And yet it's usually the one place that never gets real investment. Orgs with high-performing executive teams see 3 times the growth and profitability along with much stronger employee retention. And that's the gap our Leading Together program was built to close. It's our 4-month program, and it's not just another training event. We work directly with our executive teams to implement real systems and build the habits that create lasting trust, alignment, and shared direction. If you'd like to learn more, reach out to us at info@sixlevers.co to explore if it's the right fit for your team. Welcome to the Leading Together podcast. I'm joined by my co-host, Joe Olwig, and this week we're honored to have Andrie Leday join us. He is the U.S. Commercial Vice President of Joint Reconstruction Enabling Technologies at DePuy Synthes, where he leads strategies to accelerate market growth across orthopedic portfolios. He has over 20 years of leadership and sales experience in the health industry and has a passion for creating collaborative teams and driving impactful change. His work is guided by a strong commitment to advancing healthcare for all through strategic partnerships and innovative approaches. And Andrie is a good friend. So we're so excited to have you on the pod here. Dre, how are you doing?
I'm doing well, Shaun. Joe, really appreciate the invitation. But no, I'm doing well. It's been a great summer so far and a great year.
That's awesome. What's the highlight of your summer so far?
As busy as I am, I think the highlight of my summer, there have been 2. I'd say on the family front, we finally had some time away. Had my oldest graduate from Texas A&M. So we as a family took some time out in Florida and did some work in Florida at a property that we manage out there, and then took some time on a cruise. And I got to say, the thing I like about cruises, I didn't think I was going to be a cruise guy. Depending on which media you're following about and stories you follow about cruises, there's a bunch of horror stories. But yeah, but I find myself, what I like is just it forces you to unplug and really hyper focus on what's in front of you, spending time with family and others in a confined space. But it tends to work out for some pretty great moments.
That's great, Dre. I had that experience recently myself where I was, but I was out hiking in Yosemite, and I never have been in really anywhere in the US that had so horrible cell coverage. I literally could not contact anyone unless I was back at our Airbnb. And it was nice just to know that for every day I was like, I'm totally cut off from the world and there's nothing I can do about it.
Yeah. Exactly. And don't buy the package. You don't buy the,
right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. As soon as all those cruises,
buy the drink package, but don't buy the cell phone.
Right. That's right. On those cruises, you're getting your cell phone provider is hitting you up, telling you you've hit new international. Do you want to buy the package and all that? Right.
That's right.
Yeah. That takes some discipline. Good work. To staying focused on the family.
I appreciate it. No, it was great. Kids, getting older, right? They're getting bigger. And so one of the things I'm really deliberate about is trying to be in the moment, as busy as I am professionally. And I like to tell people I'm a pretty good executive, but I strive to be a great father. So.
That's awesome. Well, we're striving for the same ourselves here. Can certainly be challenging at times. Well, Dre, we'd love to just kick off by, you've had a pretty incredible career. You've been promoted several times. You've been in many different leadership roles. When did you first realize that you enjoyed leadership or found purpose in leading others?
That's a great question. If you'll allow me, it's a little bit of a longer story.
Yeah.
So I'm a twin, and when you're born a twin, you're typically going to find out that there are polarization aspects to your personalities, behaviors, or observed or perceived behaviors. And so my twin was the talkative one out of the 2 of us. And so what I found myself doing is listening quite a bit. And then I would act typically without a lot of announcement, but that was my mantra. Um, as we got older, we started to navigate life in different spaces. And what I would find is I had that active skill for listening. And
Mhm.
then, of course, being in a new room, I was elevating and using my voice a bit more.
Mhm.
Moving into the professional space, my professional life, I found myself mentoring quite a bit, working diligently, and from listening and applying just a fever for knowledge and self educating, being a subject matter expert in several different areas professionally, where I'd have a stage to be able to share and breathe upon others, insights and support that would help them grow. And so I had found personal success just through hard work and effort through the years. And I can think at one point in time, I had um, 14 straight years of, sales annual quota achievement in a row,
Mhm.
things
Right.
of that nature. So when you look and you have that level of success, my next challenge was, how can I broaden that challenge? How can I also
Mhm.
help others? I've always had a zeal for that. And so that's been the new pursuit, is the puzzle of having a more macro impact,
Mhm.
positive macro impact, and the ability to help and work with others. And so I look at the leadership journey and the opportunity to lead others. The challenge changes. First, you're leading yourself, right? You can just say,
Mhm.
"I'm going to do this," and you go do it. You move to secondary leadership, and now you're telling your arms, you're telling your legs, "Hey,
Mhm.
I need you to go do this," and they typically will do it. You move to
Mhm.
tertiary leadership, right?
Mhm.
Director plus level. Now you're speaking to your arms and your legs in Portuguese, and you're telling
Mhm.
them to move as you need them to move. And then when
Mhm.
you move to, say, organizational leadership, you're speaking Portuguese to your right arm, you're speaking Mandarin to your left arm, you're speaking Spanish to your foot, and you're speaking
Mhm.
Arabic to your other foot. So those are some of the challenges that I noted, and I felt very comfortable in those different dynamics. And so I would
Mhm.
say that's what's led me to more leadership.
Love that. Andre, I love this immediate connection to the power and the importance of listening when it comes to leadership. Um, but I also like that you spoke to maybe a balance that you have to find when you move up the ranks and have more experience, subject matter expertise. Talk to us about the balance as you move up that leadership sort of hierarchy in terms of how do you bring that listening and maybe even scale that listening, but also bring the subject matter expertise and that experience that you have in influencing toward, the direction that you're trying to head.
Joe, that's a difficult one, if I'm being honest.
Yeah.
Inherently, most leaders that have had individual success, we find ourselves trying to either clone ourselves
Yeah.
or micromanage the process just on a bigger scale as we move into various areas of leadership. I think the biggest lesson for me that I've learned along the way is to um, leverage my subject matter expertise around the process and understanding the field or the industry that I'm in, but
Hmm.
also recognizing I want to hire smarter people than
Yeah.
me to
Yeah.
support some of these initiatives and let them fly. But I should have enough knowledge to recognize what good looks like,
Hmm.
so that I'm not completely reliant on the word of others, and I can trust but verify, and then I can be still. I can
Yeah.
allow them to do the great things that they have the ability to do. I don't constrain them by my notion or pathway to success.
Hmm.
Um, and then, most importantly, the other thing I like, you didn't necessarily ask this particular question, but I love assembling teams of a bunch of subject matter experts, right?
Yeah.
And I like to call it the A team effect. If anybody remembers the A team, somebody
Hmm.
drove the truck, somebody did explosives, somebody flew the helicopter,
That's right.
super friends, Avengers, whichever, team analogy you want to use. But what I love is bringing together people with different skills that will
Hmm.
bring about a greater execution, a greater performance or greater outcome,
Hmm.
and knowing that I can trust that they're able to bring that to the table, and I will just oversee the process, and
And
make sure that everything goes as planned. And of course, recognizing those talents along the way is a big part of that culture, and keeping people to bring their best to the table.
That's great.
Trey, I'm curious. We would both agree with you, and I gotta speak for myself. And when I was leading teams, it was easy for my head to get around the idea that you're sharing, like that I need for us to reach our goals, or the organization to be successful, to have a diverse group of backgrounds and talents, and that I don't want to just have a bunch of clones of me, right? But then in reality, when you get there and you have people that are quite different from yourself, that can feel really challenging. And I think if we're being honest, there's parts of us that like wish they would be more like us, right? So is there a particular like skill or personality trait that was very different from your own, so like felt challenging, and like a key person on your team that then you came around on, and you were able to appreciate? Does anything come to mind there?
I would say throughout my sales journey, you're going to encounter those people routinely, whether they be internal partners, whether they be customers. It's this notion of personalities, and how you identify the different personalities, and even the micro inequities and some of the nuances that make that personality unique, and how do you connect with it. And I had counterparts in the past, and it would blow my mind. They're the quietest person in the room. Oftentimes they don't say a peep. And when you ask them to share what they did, I just work hard. They're working hard, but they're also just uniquely talented in the means of the way they communicate, the way they work with their customers, and their customers find value in that. And so I always tell people, while I have an idea on the path forward to reach success, you also have to recognize there are multiple paths to success. And the biggest I would say challenge or opportunity that I have when I'm sitting with someone is, if I come into a new role as a leader and we're sitting down, we're looking at performance, we know that there needs to be, at the end of the day, our table stakes of hitting the annual goals and what the organization has set for us. So if you have a plan to get there, you can articulate that plan, and you have a history of success doing it, we're great. It doesn't need to be my way. But if we sit down and you don't have the performance, and you don't have a plan, and I'm suggesting a plan or a path forward, and you're resistant to it, then we have a problem, right?
Yeah.
So I love people that bring opportunities forth or challenges forth. The only thing I ask is that they also bring the solution, or one or two solutions, because that's what I'm looking for when I develop leaders. I don't want them to just feel comfortable performing and not growing. I'd love to hear the voices of a multitude of people on my team, because that's when we get some of the best solutions. It may be a combination of things, and it could be the quietest voice in the room that, when it has the opportunity and the framework to speak up, can produce some amazing things.
I love that. Andrie, to go back to the A team that you were talking about earlier, you were talking about the makeup of that team and the importance of that team sort of, having some diversity in terms of capabilities and skill sets, maybe experiences.
Yeah.
If you were to think about the teams that you led that were high performing, that were successful, some of those great ones that you look back on and say that was a really strong team, what were some of the sort of the environmental conditions that were true for those teams? What did it feel like, look like to be on one of those teams? Tell us a little bit about that.
So I'm thinking about the opportunity when I started to lead in Austin, relocated the family from Colorado, and we took over in what was, I would say, a struggling situation. Customers were pretty ticked off at my predecessor. I think there was even some turnover as a result of some of that, and the counterparts within the organization weren't really talking or speaking or working with one another. But 3.5 years later, not only was my team number one, the adjoining teams in the city, we had, I think, 4 or 5 President's Club teams within the same city. And I think at the root of that, Joe, was this notion that, one, everyone wanted to win. Number two, everyone was willing to understand what the other person needed to be successful. And
Mm.
how could we block and tackle for one another in the midst of also achieving our goal? But what was the shared goal? Winning. And
Yeah.
so as a result, when I would sit down, initially it was, I was representing neurosurgery and navigation and at the time. And so if I was sitting down with my team, I could represent that. My spine counterpart would represent spine. The pain person would represent pain. Well, at the end of it,
Mm-hmm.
I trusted my counterpart to represent neurosurgery, to represent all those interests on my behalf in a meeting. So my reps could go with that
Mm-hmm.
person. And likewise, the spine reps would call me and say, "Hey, Andre, could you come in and speak about capital
Mm-hmm.
and or neurosurgery with our customers?" We had this trusted understanding of what each other needed to achieve. And
Mm-hmm.
fundamentally, we're in lockstep that we were going to be everywhere and anywhere representing our overall value. And we all
Yeah.
could communicate that clearly. Um,
Yeah.
and the end result, we were winning everywhere. So
Wow.
it was great.
Yeah.
Tr- Trey, I have a follow-up question there. I love this. We could probably just stay in this one lane for the rest of the time. I'm sure Joe's got some ideas firing here too. But you talked about trust there, and I don't know if you've heard of the Covey concept of moving at the speed of trust, right? But what were the investments that were made in each other? Like, how did y'all build some connection to get to that place of what feels like high trust amongst the team?
So, Shaun, this is one of my favorite stories. So, it did not start that way when we
Yeah.
sat down initially here in the Austin area. Um, I can remember going to dinner with my vice president, other vice president, and all the stakeholders. And there was a very tenured representative there that looked across the table. And after the vice presidents were talking about, "Hey, we need to come together and work as a team. This is going to be great," and they were looking for this more tenured, senior member of the team to help, bring me and the team, my team along, to be a part of the equation. And he was highly successful at the time. But he stood up at the table and said, "You can't do anything for me. What can you do for me?" And was like,
Mm.
there's nothing in this for me to move this along in X, Y, and Z. And so I listened to this individual spout off about that for about, 20, 30 minutes. And, sadly, the leadership couldn't get this person aligned. But I looked at the number 2 and the number 3 rep sitting right there at the table. And I could tell they weren't necessarily aligned to him, but, he was the top dog at the time. And so I
Mhm.
told my team, we're going to do everything under our power to help those 2 grow. We're going to make an
Mm.
example of what's
Mm.
possible out of those that are willing. And
Mm.
so the beautiful thing was, because they also wanted to achieve, and this person was kind of taking all the air out of a lot of the situations, I poured the exceptions, you name it,
Mhm.
and created value for them in very unique ways that we hadn't done before to help them advance their business, our business as an organization. And they were then ingrained. They're still dear friends to this day, and we still
Mhm.
stay in contact. But we forged real bonds and relationships for them that were meaningful and helped them
Mhm.
achieve goals in their life that I think they had only dreamed of. And so it's
Yeah.
finding the right opportunity, going at it the right way. It may not be direct, but if you have your
Yeah.
eyes and ears open, as we started the
Mm.
conversation, you'll see and listen and find the opportunity for the path forward or the crack in the wall that'll let you through.
Mm. That's great. Inside our framework, we'll refer to some of what you're describing here as a real commitment to teamship, right? This idea of we can be better when we are aligned and taking shared ownership and committed to each other in the team. And I love your story because so often the way there is to just model it, right? To just do it, to sort of be the change and to show others what it looks like to commit to that. We're committed to making these folks better and doing that in a selfless way. Um, to go back to your initial response to this willingness to sort of understand each other and to bring a little bit more of our language and bring out the best in each other is so
Mhm.
important to high performing teams. And when
Mm.
teams have that condition, you almost see this elevated sort of level of team shit and
That's right.
commitment to each other. Um, but how do you get there? Is this the example that helps us to see, what it takes to bring that type of, create that mentality across a team? If you compare it to a traditional, a typical team, especially an executive, a leadership team, you see folks taking care of their lanes, worried about their, performance goals. And oftentimes, the language silos is overused, but it's true, it's real. And our organizations oftentimes and our systems are really the culprit of why this is so pervasive. But you spoke immediately to your team's willingness to really understand each other, bring out the best in each other. So just wondering, how you made that happen, what that looked like.
So I also have another leadership philosophy, Joe. That's
Yeah.
as a new leader, when I come into a team or an organization, I look for what I call opportunities for greatness.
Mm,
And these opportunities for greatness are typically these, urgent or timely situations with an individual where they need something or could benefit from something. And
mhm,
there wouldn't be a natural inclination for them to expect me to do something or to find that path or favor for them.
mhm.
But I make it a point to urgently latch onto those opportunities and create a valued outcome and honestly a bridge and a kinship
Yeah.
with individuals. So
Mm.
an example of that would be if my spine team or my neurosurgery team needed a certain part for a case or procedure, instead of trying to, have one of my, hardworking 60 plus hour sales reps or managers drive, at 10 o'clock at night, halfway to San Antonio to share a part, I would grab the part from their
Yeah.
storage. I would
Mhm,
drive there and meet the other person so that my team could have just an extra hour of sleep that night.
mhm.
If there's a unit
Mm.
that was being delivered to a children's hospital in the heat of the summer, and they're covering clinical cases, serving patients and improving lives, it would not be uncommon for me to throw on a pair of scrubs and be on my back in a
Yeah.
stinky dock area, uncrating, a 2,000 pound, imaging system, just to make sure that they could continue to serve. So by
Yeah.
putting those deposits in the bank,
Mhm,
when I call upon that withdrawal, there's something there.
mhm.
And the nice thing is it pays dividends. You don't have to do it often, but if you do it enough and you do it genuinely,
Yeah.
it just becomes a part of the framework.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love that.
Jay, one thing I think that one of the first things you responded to when you talked about an earlier question was just that everyone was so aligned around winning.
Mhm.
And what I pictured there was just a really clear picture of what winning was for that team.
Yeah.
And I share this because I think we've worked with a number of teams where I think winning, or how we win, is a little blurry, is a little abstract, and not as clear as maybe I think people would want it to be, right? And if we go to like the progress principle and what motivates humans, like we need to know like the definition of winning really clearly.
Mhm.
And so, and also I think to Joe's point around teamship, that often becomes like the most important basis and criteria for how we come together. We're unified in reaching this very clear goal. Like the line that we're aiming for is not unclear to anyone. So I'm curious, have you ever been on or led a team where maybe it wasn't as clear? And when you think about the difference between those teams' performance, do you see any correlation there?
Yeah, I mean, I've entered teams obviously where that
Yeah.
was the what was inherited, but
You don't let it last long.
you don't let it last
Yeah.
long, and the other thing is I solicit to the hedgehog principle and some of the other things where
That's right.
from good to great you have to have the right people on the bus, and
Yeah.
so very quickly and succinctly I think is assessing the motivations of individuals on the team, and is it a matter of training, is it motivation, is it just misalignment? So, but if you have a notion that you have the right people on the team, clearly articulating you want to be the partner of choice, and what does that look like? What are examples of that? Customers are calling you first and often. Surgeons are seeking your counsel. Patients are happy and satisfied and having amazing results. So all of those things, I think it's really a part of one, recognizing where the team is, and then
Mhm.
making sure you have the right people on the bus, the right team assembled. And if not,
Mhm.
you need to quickly address that, because the more you let that linger, I would say the less traction you can have as a leader, because people
Mhm.
recognize that you let something go on far too long.
Okay.
And
Yeah.
then, ultimately after that is, have everybody pin their ears back and let's go. And,
Yeah.
having that and being the biggest cheerleader, as well as the straight line to hold things together and call out things and correct them. But, I am absolutely the biggest cheerleader, for my
Mhm.
teams, for my organizations. I consider myself an ambassador for those that, give me the honor of leading, an organization, as well as those that I'm in the charge of. So
Mm.
I'm also going to be an ambassador for them, as well as a sometimes coach slash disciplinarian when necessary.
Mm.
Yeah.
That's good.
Well, Jay, I think there's this real clear picture of how much you're developing and investing in your team, the people that are on your team. Who was one of the first people that did that for you, that helped you in your career to realize something maybe you didn't yet see yourself, that really believed in you and saw your potential?
There are three people, and I think they're in different facets of my life, and I don't know how professional one is versus the other. The first is a gentleman by the name of Randy Swift. He was the vice president of marketing for then Nations Bank, and I was a summer intern, 17 years old,
Oh,
collegiate internship program. And he took me to I think it's the 67th floor of what was then the Nations Bank Plaza. And we had breakfast there. And there
mm,
he set my notion and tone of, this can be you each and every day. This is an
Mm.
opportunity. You're a bright young man. You've got a lot of promise. What do you want to do? And taking the time to really force me to articulate what I wanted for myself, but the sky was the limit, right? He really set
mm.
a really beautiful moment for me. And I still keep in contact with Randy. He's down in Jupiter, Florida. Hi, Randy. Um, and so I appreciate that. The next would be my first opportunity in med device. I met a lady by the name of Miriam Marker, in the Denver airport. I was flying out to work with my team in Utah. She was flying to work with her team in Utah. And we just started conversing on different either leadership mantras and things we were, working through and challenges. And she asked me, have you ever thought about, going into medical device? And I, mentioned to her I just hadn't had the right pathway and, working through that. And not only did she help, 10 months later, 10 and a half months later, after staying in contact, help me get my first opportunity, even though it was a double demotion and a 36% pay cut to get
Wow.
in. But she helped me get my first opportunity. And after showing individual success, when the leadership was trying to get me to go to another struggling market and just do the same thing as as an individual contributor, she said, no, no, no. His next move is to leadership, because
Mm.
there's no way, shape, or form that, of course he can go do this and you're going to pay him a bunch of money to go do something in another market. They wanted me to go to Detroit and take it over, which I was capable of doing. But she knew that wouldn't necessarily align to my overall goals. And number two, that
Mm.
I was worthy and had the potential for much more. So I appreciate her for putting that bookmark, in the thoughts of others so that we could come back to it. The last I would say is the gentleman that gave me the opportunity to truly have an organizational, impact at scale was a gentleman by the name of Nnamdi Njoku. So Nnamdi, had worked across different leadership, roles in my prior organization. And when he had an AVP opportunity, come open, he knew of some things I had done elsewhere. And he's the gentleman who saw that I had the potential to lead, half a country and $100+ million in business at the time, and gave me my first opportunity in the DP ranks back in like 2017. And I haven't looked back since. And so I want to thank all those individuals and give them a quick homage.
Love that.
That's great. I love that you had three.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean,
That's not uncommon though, right? I mean, it takes a village,
yeah,
and there's a lot of people along the way that if we take a step back, that probably played a part in our lives.
that's right. So these three sort of helped pave that path, help create some of those opportunities for you, even provide some of that initial belief in you and your leadership. On the back end of sort of these different stories, leadership's taxing. It can be lonely. How do you approach, keeping your tank as full as it can be? Approach what can feel isolating at times. Tell us a little bit about how you approach that.
You are correct, Joe. Leadership can be very isolating. Can be very, very lonely with some of the decisions, the difficult decisions, the weight of what needs to be done, even when it's not quite where it needs to be, and the heat that can come down. Um, I'll say there's a couple of things that keep me rooted. My family. I have an
Mhm.
amazing wife and partner of 27 years now. Got that
Mm.
right. Um, Brandy. And so, we started out, together, with, barely two nickels to rub together in an apartment that, had little squirrels running through the roof and you name it. And so if I ever feel a little too high, she's there to remind me to take out the trash.
Yeah.
Um, and so I love that. And also too, the people that I consider my true friends, we stay grounded on things well outside of work, which is always great. And I also try to make sure that I spend a lot of time in nonprofit work,
Mhm.
serving on boards. I get a chance to not only give of my time and my input to impact lives, but I see the impact I can have on, not just my community, but other communities, other lives. And so those are things that help me stay grounded. And then last, from a personal standpoint, I'm a big do-it-yourself guy.
Hmm.
And so, I tell people all the time the anchor for that is my grandfather uh, um, raised 10 kids and couldn't read or write, had a very
Hmm.
successful business, but he raised them with these two hands.
Mhm.
And I've realized now in the more recent years that I've outkicked my coverage, as people like to say, and what I had from an ambition standpoint for myself. I would have never imagined as a 10-year-old Andre that this is what had the honor and privilege of doing today.
Wow.
But the fact that that's present, if it
Mhm.
were taken away tomorrow, I can still feed my family with these two hands. And so automotive work, electrical work, tile work, landscaping, masonry. Those are all things, plumbing, those are all things that I purposefully do around my home.
Mhm.
Um, Not to be cheap, but honestly, it's really, these are puzzles that I have the chance to solve on my own behalf, for my family's behalf, and get a level of satisfaction out of that. So.
Mm.
Yeah, and I can definitely testify to that being true with Dre. I've learned. At first, I would text him and say, "Hey, what do you do for this?" And then I would be real careful about that because it would end up in him just like wanting to
Showing
do
up.
it, like fix it and show up over here. And I'm like, I don't know, you don't have to do all that. Like, I just really want to know what you do. But it resulted him dropping something off on my porch or a piece of equipment, or after my wife had surgery on her shoulder, some stuff to help her heal from ice, all the different things that would, icing and all that. So can definitely testify to you being a jack of all trades around the house.
Yeah.
I aspire to be that for sure. Well, Dre, one question that we ask everybody that comes on the pod is to think of the best teammate that you've ever had. You don't have to name this person. Sometimes a few people come to mind when you think of this question. But when you think of that great teammate or teammates, what characteristics did they embody that made you think of this person when you were asked this question?
Um, They could keep up.
Mm.
Uh, I run
Uh-huh.
a pretty hard pace,
Uh-huh.
and it is rare for me to find kindred spirits that keep the same pace as
Right.
me with regards to the workspace and things to be done. And so when I find those special individuals, and there's one in particular, I've had the chance to work with this individual since 2007, and extremely hard worker, and has done some amazing things, and professionally as well as personally. Purple Heart recipient, just an amazing individual. So
Wow.
when I think of teammates and partners, these are also selfless people that just work really hard and produce some amazing results. And honestly, create a followership in and of themselves because they're
Uh-huh.
leading, not
Uh-huh.
managing. And when you're
Uh-huh.
leading, people want to follow versus being told what they need to do.
Mm.
Yeah. That's great, Trey.
Love that.
Where can people maybe find you or follow you if they want to get in touch with you or follow some of your leadership thoughts?
I'm pretty limited on my social output, but I would say LinkedIn is
Yeah, you have a
probably the
presence on LinkedIn.
yeah,
Yeah.
little something, but LinkedIn is probably the best space to connect with me. Other than that, I try to attend several job conferences and recruiting conferences, and I've spoken on panels at a few of those, and try to make myself available. So I will be in attendance at the National Sales Network
Mm.
conference in DC next month. But beyond that, LinkedIn, I'm an open book. I try to mentor, recent college grads to, early in career and even experienced um, professionals when time permits. And so I'm always open and available to help support folks.
That's great, Trey. You mentioned your work on nonprofit boards. Any nonprofits you want to call out or just recognize here?
I do. So thank you, Shaun, for the
Yeah.
opportunity, and Joe as well.
Yeah.
So one that's very near and dear to my heart is Empowering Women of Purpose, which was formerly known as Empowering Women Out of Prison. It is a nonprofit organization that is housed in Lockhart, Texas, which helps women who have been incarcerated uh, find their voice. Find their purpose, but also to have the opportunity to develop the skills for entrepreneurship such
Mm.
that when they leave incarceration, that they have an opportunity for a livable wage, and honestly controlling their own fate from an employment standpoint as well as a life standpoint. We set it up almost in a Shark Tank style mantra where
Oh,
Mm,
cool.
there are also universities that support this program. So formerly University of Houston, Texas A&M, University of Texas, their grad students, professors donate their time, come and teach courses, put together business plan information for the ladies who then put their own pitches together, put their own
Mm.
understanding and do their own work on their business plans, pitch those to a bunch of leadership volunteers from various industries. And the magic happens. It's absolutely amazing. We've had over 400 ladies at this point that have graduated from the 9-month program with their
Wow.
business certificate. And we've had zero recidivism to date. And so it's a
oh,
highly
Wow.
that's
effective
amazing.
program.
That's incredible.
And what's that website, Trey?
So it's ewop.org. So empoweringwomenofpurpose.org.
That's awesome. Great. Well, and you've exposed me to the great work they're doing, and I'm a supporter and follower of their work as a result of you. So, thanks for that, and
I'll
thanks for being
also,
on. Oh
I'll
yeah,
also plug one more group.
yeah, yeah. Go for it.
It's
Yeah.
called Put Me In Coach,
Mm,
or Put Me
There
mm,
you
In.
go.
And so
mhm,
Khalid Cannon, graduate of, I think, Yale,
oh
is
yeah,
the founder of
yeah.
this organization. And again, he also supports children of currently incarcerated and helps them stay in the game by sponsoring organized sport fees and things of that nature so that kids feel greater connection to the broader community. And they even get updates that go to their parents that are currently incarcerated. So it's an opportunity for them to give back.
I love that, Trey. I think with like you having kids and organized sports and club sports and things like that, you definitely see that there are some barriers for certain folks and families to be able to participate. So love that he's doing that work. Well, Trey, thanks so much for being on. This has been so great. We really appreciate your time, given how much you've got going on. And as always, thanks for tuning into this episode of Leading Together. If you found it valuable, be sure to like, subscribe, or leave a review. It helps more leadership teams discover these conversations. If you're watching on YouTube, hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, or drop a comment with your thoughts. And as always, you can find more resources at sixlevers.co, including signing up for our newsletter that we send out every Tuesday morning. Thanks.